Hey YouTube world, I am back with another video. I did promise many of you that I would tell the story on how I got my Picotin with you. Then I'll do a review of my Picotin, but it won't be a regular review of what fits, how to style it. There are plenty of great YouTubers that did videos over the years on that, so I want to do it a little bit different. And instead, I got a fake one here from my friend Replica Collection to show you an easy way to authenticate a Picotin bag. And if you haven't seen my friend's entire fake bag collection, I'll link it for you above and below in the show notes. We share our opinions on why we no longer carry replica bags. We had a lot of fun doing that video, so if you like this kind of content, hit that like and subscribe button for me to let me know that you want to see more. So let's get right into it. And just to tell you, I left all of the boxes and the pretty wrapping paper back in Chicago, but that's not really important. This is the star of the show, right? So for this particular bag, I actually purchased this in Sweden, so Stockholm specifically. I was actually on a layover in Stockholm, going to visit my friend in Latvia, and there was no direct flight from Chicago, so obviously I had to lay over somewhere, and I decided to stop there for 2 or 3 days just to check out Stockholm because I've never been there. So it was kind of like my first solo vacation on my own, and I had such a great time. It's such a cool city, especially in June. Like, I don't think I've ever been to a country in the summer where they get like 22 hours of daylight. It's crazy. People are out at like 11 o'clock at night when the sun is still completely like out and bright, and just having a great time enjoying the summer. So it was pretty bizarre to me. But anyways, so the minute I got off the plane, I was like, there's an Hermes store, and I like dropped off my luggage, checked into my hotel, and beelined. It was walking distance, so that was kind of nice. It's to, stretch your legs after a super long flight. Beelined over to the Hermes store, and it was inside a mall. They don't have a standalone store in Stockholm, and basically ran up to the line, stood in line for maybe, I want to say, about 20-30 minutes, so it wasn't even that long, and my hair was just like a complete train wreck after, like a 13 or, was it 13? I can't remember, 11-hour flight? It was something really long. And I was just like, I had to brush my teeth at the hotel just to make sure I don't stink up the people around me. But yeah, I did all of that and stood in line for about 20-30 minutes. They let me in. They're like, feel free to look around the store. A sales associate will be, shortly coming to help you, right? So I looked at the bracelets. It was a really small store. I looped it like 5 times before this nice sales associate came to help me. And she's like, what are you looking for today, right? And immediately I was like, do you have any belts? I was looking for, a Kelly belt, which they didn't have any in stock. So I'm just like, okay, well, whatever. And then I was like, I'm actually looking for a Picotin, right? I wasn't about to ask for Hermes or Kelly, consider that it was a tiny store and, a tourist. And it was like my second time being in an Hermes store to actually purchase something. So I felt a little too scared, if that's the right word, to even ask for Hermes or Kelly, and then for them to like just laugh at me. It's like, okay, yeah, like we're gonna give you a Birkin or a Kelly at this small store. So I was like, okay, let's play it safe and see if I can get a Picotin, right? And the sales associate was super nice. We had a little bit of chit chat, and she's like, oh, where are you coming from? I'm like, oh, I come from Chicago. And she was just like, oh, I lived in Chicago for a number of years. It's a great city. I'm like, yeah, awesome, blah, 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 right? So after a little bit of chit chat, I asked for the Picotin, and I asked for, I'm only interested in gold hardware and a neutral color. I'm open to, colors, but I would like for it to be neutral, and I do not want a black one. She's like, huh, interesting. Okay, yeah, let me see what I can do. Immediately, she disappeared, came back in about 10 minutes, and she opened up the box and showed me this particular bag, which I was just like, oh, I love it. So this particular color is actually in trench, and I think it's a 2022 color. I should really brush up on my leather knowledge, so to speak. But yeah, she said this is in a gorgeous color trench, and it's in the Clemence leather. Apparently, they only produce Clemence leather as of recent. I don't think I've ever seen, unless it's like from a pre-loved market, Epsom leather, but those are the only 2 kinds of leathers that the Picotin comes in terms of regular leather. Obviously, it comes in canvas and like exotic leathers, but in terms of like the regular leathers, only Clemence and Epsom. So she's like, how do you feel about this? I'm like, I love it. I want it. Take my money, right? She started laughing. So yeah, it was a really good experience for me to be able to just walk in and be able to purchase a Picotin. So and then she's like, is there anything else you're looking for? Perhaps shoes or anything? I was like, I would love a pair of Oran shoes, but however, I've got bad feet problems. Unfortunately, I can't wear those, right? So she's like, okay, well, that's pretty much what we have. And then they had a ton of boots and whatever, but I was so ecstatic about this that I was like, I just got off the plane explaining my situation, so I'm just like dead and I can't think of anything else because I just beelined and I was so happy with this. So just go ahead and just check me out. Cool. And then I'm like, I'm starving. Would you have any restaurant recommendations? She's like, yes. And she went out of her way to be extra nice to me. And she basically spent time writing down 4 or 5 restaurants in the walking distance, like 5 minutes, that she really recommended. And she gave it to me on this really pretty Hermes note card. So it was such a great experience, right? And then after I left, and because it was such a great experience, I don't know if this helped her out, but I did go onto the Hermes website and I wrote to their corporate expressing how enjoyable of an experience I had at their store. Hopefully she gets some recognition. I did follow up after, I forget what I followed up for. Maybe I have to look at my emails, but I did follow up because she did provide me with her email and I just thank her for such a great, wonderful experience. And she wrote back like the next day saying, you're most welcome. We hope to see you again, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a really nice interaction. So I hope to go back to Stockholm relatively soon. So let's talk about pricing. So I don't have the receipts with me. It's actually back in Chicago, but it's going to be talking in the Sweden's currency. And just so you know, even though they are part of the EU, they don't operate on euros. They have their own currency called kronas. For those of you who are in the States or outside of the EU here, I didn't know that. So when I got there, I was like, oh, I thought this was in euros because it's like a lot more numbers instead of like the euros, which is just a little bit, larger than the US dollar, right? So I would figure everything is in like $5 or, $2 for coffee or whatever it is, right? Their currency is much larger, right? So I'm like, I'm not reading this correctly. Of course, like I said, I just got off the plane, right? She was reading off numbers to me in kronas. And then she's like, oh, okay, yeah, we don't do euros here. Okay, gotcha. That makes more sense now. So just to convert it into US dollars, this actually came out to be $2,300. This was summer of 2022 when I purchased this, right? So after I get my VAT refund after I left the EU, this actually came out to be $1,980-ish. So this is a complete steal, knowing that the Picotin today is over $3,300 plus tax in the United States. Sorry, I just had to step away to check the prices. So it's actually $3,025 here in the United States for a Picotin 18. And basically, after VAT refund and doing the math here, I saved over $1,300. And then if you pay the duties, which is, maybe $100 or $200. So let's just average it out. I saved about 35-40% just by purchasing in Sweden. And just so you know, it is not your traditional 12% VAT refund like it is in Paris. In Sweden, it's actually different. They have a tiered system where you get a flat dollar amount. So let's just say it's from 100 to 500 or for 500 to 2,000. The more you spend, the higher percentage that you get back. So for this one, again, I'm not doing my math here, but just understand that this is a tiered system and you get 12%, 13%. If you spend over, I think from the little chart, every sales associate has a little piece of paper with like the percentage of how much you would get back because, it's like a little cheat sheet where if you spend over like $10,000 or $15,000, you can get upwards of 18 to 20% cash back if you were to purchase in Sweden. So like I said, it is completely different from Europe where it's a flat 12% that you get back in terms of that refund. Isn't that crazy? So fun to know, right? So enough of that. So that's basically the story. And then also just so you know, Hermes will not hold the item for you. I know some places like other luxury places like Chanel, like, hey, you make the purchase now, you can hold it. I don't know if it's by Hermes to Hermes stores, but if you purchase it and you say you want to come back and get it later because you're going out to dinner or whatever, per their policy at that particular Hermes store, they require to bring the item with you after you purchase it. You can't leave it at their store and come back to collect it later. So again, something interesting to note there. All right, so that is my happy purchase when I went to Europe last summer. Let's talk a little bit about the comparisons when it comes to a fake Hermes bag versus a real Hermes bag, Picotin wise. So I did some, I'm not gonna make you watch all of this, but I did do some measurements as well as weighing of these bags. I will tell you that this particular fake one is an amazing fake. Like me and my friend were expecting this together because I brought my newish Picotin over to her house, and we were just looking at it together, just looking at the differences. When you put them side by side, you're gonna know the difference. But if you were to just wear this one down the street, you probably won't be able to tell. The replicas have gotten so good that you can hardly tell unless you have a real one next to it and doing the comparison to a normal eye, right? Like a normal consumer like me who has experience. I'm not an authenticator, obviously. If you are, you can probably spot the difference, right? So just to kind of talk about the measurements as a whole, I'll put it on the screen or I'll put it in the show notes so that you can see the difference. I will tell you that this fake 18 bag is about half inch bigger on every side and also on the strap. This strap right here, I did measure it. This is 7 inches. And then for here, it is going to be 7.5 inches, just to give you an example. It's the same thing with the base of the bottom as well as the strap. Everything is like half an inch bigger. So I found that to be interesting. And then in terms of the weight, this fake one is going to be heavier, right? So this is going to come out at about 505 grams. And then this one came out to be about 466 grams. And for my US friends, about 1 pound and 1-ish pounds, 1.05-ish pounds. And then for this one, it's going to be 1.2 pounds. So yeah, there is a pretty big difference. Like obviously if you are handling this, you won't tell difference. But if I were to pick up both of these, I can tell this one is significantly lighter than this particular one. And then just to point out some of the key features here, again, I'm not sure if you can see this on camera. The first thing we noticed is that the stitching on the outside, like this has the angled stitching. So I applaud them for doing that. And then for this one, if you can see it properly, there is the diagonal stitching as well. And then you can see also at the top here, they're known to have the double stitching. Come on, focus. The double stitching at the top. And then if any of these like footages come out after I film it, it's like completely blurry, I'll take better photos and screenshot them on there for you. But there's the double stitching for the top 3, and then the rest of it is going to be single stitching. They actually did a really good job. And you can see they also did the double stitching for the first 3 stitches, and then the rest of them are single stitches. The one thing we noticed immediately is that the thread that they use for this is a lot more plasticky and much more shiny, whereas this one is much more matted and actually aligns more closely to the color of the bag, which obviously I know there's contrast stitching depending on the Picotin that you get, but based on this particular piece, this is going to be very close to the actual color of the trench bag or the Picotin bag. The other thing we immediately noticed, obviously the real one's not going to come with these little rubber feet. Mine came with little stickers at the bottom, which I since then peeled off. But you can see that the bottom of the feet here, they say that if it twists, obviously it's a fake. The real ones aren't going to be able to be shifted and moved around. And then the other thing I immediately noticed is that there is a break. You can see where they lined, there's a line right here, right? It lines up where they connected 2 pieces of leather, I guess. I don't know how you describe that, but you can see that there's a line right here. Whereas the real one is one uniform leather trim across the base of the bottom entirely. There is no connecting lines or anything like that. So that's another key thing to look out for. So moving on over to the locks, and you can see that the gold is completely different. This is a true gold, where this one actually looks kind of like greenish, right? So obviously you can tell that the gold color is different. And then of course you can see the size of the lock. Even the size of the lock is different. You see how mine's a little bit skinnier and taller, whereas the fake one is going to be a little bit shorter and stubbier. The other thing I will teach you, and this only applies to the newer Hermes bags, is that the numbers on here. So you can see, trying to not get the reflection as well as my dirty fingerprints on here, but you can see the Hermes logo, where this one's all the way up to the corners, whereas this one is a complete, uniform. It's just much more crisp. There's even lining across for the stamp, and this is just a super weird font. One thing I will teach you is that the lock, obviously the lock itself, if you're buying pre-loved, it might not be the same lock as the bag. So what you'll want to look at is the numbers. This one says 0232. So this is a 2022 bag. So you want to make sure that the lock is a matching lock with the bag itself. So if you get a 2012 or a 2021 bag and then the lock says 0232, it's a 2022 lock when you have a 2021 bag, right? That there's discrepancy there. Not that it's saying it's fake, but there's a discrepancy between the lock and the bag itself. It's kind of like the Louis Vuitton stamp from back in the day where you read the second number and the last number, and that should tell you the year that this lock was made, which is 2022, right? And then at the bottom here, there should be 3 numbers. This one says 110. I left the keys back in Chicago, but it does match up with the keys. It also says 110 on there. Now for this one, it has the numbers on there, but it's like incredibly hard to read. And it says 0, 1, 2, is that an 8 or a 3? I can't tell. Regardless, this particular bag has a Y stamp. Represents 2020, and then this one basically just says 0, 1, 2, 8 or 6, so 1, 6. So clearly this is not a match for the bag itself, right? My bag is stamped U, meaning that it is a 2022 bag, which obviously matches with the actual lock itself. So I just undid the bag, I took the stuffing out, but the other thing I wanted to show you is that the bottom base is going to be the stamp, which they did a pretty good job, but you can tell that the letterings aren't very crisp when it comes to the stamp here. The Hermes Hermes Paris made in France. Comparing it to my real one, where it's very thin, very crisp, this one's going to be a little bit more flooded, so to speak, or bleeding into the leather, but it's still pretty good if you are not an expert. And then the other thing is that when you look into the bag, lighting's not really great right now, but if you look into the bag, I'm just shining a light for you, you can see the exposed stitching, right? And that's where you can start seeing the sloppy work of the threads at the bottom of the base where it is not great stitching and it's all exposed. Now, if you look at this real Hermes bag, you will not see any of the stitching at all. It is all covered by the actual trim of the bottom of the base. It's hard to describe. I'm not having the greatest time with words right now, but you can't see the exposed stitching compared to this fake one right here. You see how there's the white? So hopefully that makes sense to you. So that's another thing you want to look out for when it comes to a fake versus real bag. I put the bags back together, and there's one thing I wanted to point out that I've noticed is that the grain of the bag, this is going to be a lot larger in terms of each of the grains, whereas this one is much more compact and very, very condensed. So that's the other thing I wanted to point out. So to wrap up this video, I hope this was helpful. Follow me on Instagram if you haven't already. I've been posting random sample sales that I found recently, like MZ Wallace or Louisa Roma deals on bags like APC and other brands that are out there. So definitely give me a follow so that way you can, take advantage of any deals that I see for you. So check out my Picotin dupe video here and whatever the YouTube algorithm thinks that you will like here. Life is hard. I want to help you save time and money so that you can somehow adult easier and less than retail. I'll see you next time.